Excel practice problem, create accounting worksheet part number 2. Get ready because we're about to excel with Excel. Here we are in our Excel worksheet. In a prior presentation, we put this information together from a blank sheet. So you could start from a blank sheet if you so choose. If you have access to this workbook, there's going to be 2 tabs on down below, an example tab and a practice tab. The example tab in essence being an answer key. Let's take a look at the example tab now. Last time we put this information together on the left, and then we started to create the trial balance. We are in essence going to finish up the trial balance at this point. Going to go back to the tab on the right, the practice tab. Now note I started creating this. We created this over here in column E, and I'd like to pull it over to column A. So I'm going to delete some of the columns now so I can pull this over to column A, putting my cursor on column A, drop down, dragging on over to column D, let go, right click on the selected area and delete. So there we have that. So now we've got our information happening here in A1. And then we've got our trial balance that we have constructed. Last time we color-coded our trial balance. We put the account names in there. Then we put the numbers in there. The debits being positive, the credits being negative, not having 2 columns, because that'll make it a lot easier functionality-wise with regards to Excel, allowing us to do things like having a sum formula down below, which will then give us the idea that this thing is in balance very quickly, very nicely, very neatly. It will also help us to calculate net income, which we could do down here. I could say net income, and I don't have to say something minus another thing. I don't have to say this cell minus the sum of these cells and be working with 2 columns. I can simply sum up these cells. Now it's going to give me a credit because the credits are represented with negative numbers, which looks like a negative. So it's going to be equals the sum of the revenue line on down to all of the expenses. And that gives me very quickly my net income much more easily than if I had a 2-column worksheet and the formula is a lot cleaner. It's a negative number, which you might see as like a negative, like a loss. It's not a loss because the revenue happens to be a credit in the format that we have set up here. So that takes some getting used to. You could flip the sign by putting a negative sum like that, so it's a positive. But I like to keep it that way to see it in terms of debits and credits because I'm working in a debit and credit type of worksheet. Okay, so then we're going to have the entries column, and then the sum column, or the ending balance, is just going to be the sum of these entries that are going to go across. So I'm going to say this equals the sum of these 2 items. Now the entries are going to have the same kind of component. We're going to have the debits positive, credits are going to be negative, making it a nice, clean, really easy formula to get to the ending balance. I don't have to say 1 column plus this column minus the other column and reverse it if it's something different, right? I could just simply say, if it's a positive number here, that means it's a debit. It's going to increase my balance. It's a negative number. That means it's a credit. It's going to decrease. Very clean, very easy formula. We can then take that one, drag it on down using the autofill handle, putting our cursor on the autofill handle, and drag it on down, dragging it on down to here. So there we have that. So we got the same information pulling across. Now I'd like to format it with that green, the same kind of formatting. I'm going to redo it so I don't mess up any of the formatting. I could format paint it, but I'm going to recreate this green and green here by going to the font group, drop down. Let's make this the dark green, and then the lettering font group, I'm going to make this the light green, and then I'll go back and put the borders in a second. This is going to be the dark orange, and then we've got the lettering is going to be the light orange, and then this one, the little bit confusing, this is the dark blue, which is this dark blue, and then the lettering here is going to be the light blue. That's not lettering. Hold on a second. Then the lettering is going to be the light blue. And then these are all going to be the little bit different dark blue font group bucket. Dark blue, but a little bit different on the dark blue like that one. And then the lettering's once again the light blue. We'll put the borders around it. So I'm going to select this entire thing. You could put the black borders font group with the black borders. And you can see the contrast between the borders. But the white borders might stand out a little bit more, which takes a little bit more effort to do. Font group drop down, scrolling down to the borders. we hit the drop down here. We want to make the white coloring, and then I'm going to put the border all the way around and the full grid line. So it's around the whole thing, which you can't really see in the little display box because it's white on a white background, but okay. So there we have it. So that looks good. I want the same formatting over here. So I'm going to select this entire formatting, this entire column, and go to the good old Format Paintbrush, Home tab, Clipboard, Format Painter. I'm just going to brush that over here. So there we have that. The middle column, I like to make blue because this is going to be where the data input is. We're going to manually put information into this middle column. Any place I manually put information into, I'm going to make blue. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say, let's make the bucket. Well, let's do the same bucket over here. Bucket over here, that blue. I'm going to, if you don't have it, you can go to the more colors item, standard, and then we're going to be in that blue right there. I use it because that's what the Excel is Fun guy used to use. And that's what I use. So I'm going to hit the drop down. We're going to say all borders now. This time the black borders. So because they'll stand out more against the blue. And so there we have it. So there we have our nice little worksheet. Now down below, this one is summing up. So what I'd like to do is sum this up and pull that to the right. So I'm just going to put my cursor on the fill handle, pull it to the right. So now we have the sum going all the way across. And then the bottom line down here, the net income, I'm also going to pull that across so I can see, pulling this across, I can see the change then. And then I can see the ending net income will calculate. Again, very clean, very easy formulas. The reason they are because we're utilizing this idea of having the debits be positive, the credits be negative. And that means we don't need 6 columns here. That means we don't need plus minus formulas, but we could use some formulas for the most part and sum things up. So it's a lot more functionally useful than a lot of other worksheets that you'll see if they break it out in some other kind of way. But use whatever is there. I'm not trying, you could use whatever format works for you, but just consider that when you're thinking about worksheet. I would like not to have 6 columns if I can do it. I'd like to have cleaner formulas if I can do that. And so on. That'll just make, once you're working on a complex accounting problem, looking at the format, I'd like my formulas to be as simple as possible. So then down below, I'm going to make this items down below. Let's make these black and white like our headers. So I'm going to make the footer in essence black and white here as well. I'm going to make this black and white. I'm going to do a little bit something different on those zeros up top. What I'd like to do, because these are check figures here, so what I'd like to do, if there's 0, I'd like it to show up as green, indicating that it's in balance. If those turn out to be something other than 0, I would like them to turn red, which would give me a quick indication that something is out of balance. So in other words, if this was at like 2000 and that's not 0 anymore, something's wrong with our worksheet. So I'm going to undo that. So to do that, and I'm going to give it a little bit of leeway in case there's rounding. So what I'd like to say is if it's within like $1 on the plus or the minus, it's still close enough to 0 to be green. If it's over $1 in error, then I'd like it to turn red. So to do that, we could do some fancy conditional formatting. So I'm going to go to the Home tab, the styles, and we got to lay down 3 conditions to make this work. So I'm going to do the greater than condition first. I'm going to say if it's greater than, here's my information. If it's greater than 1, I want it to turn red, and that's the default fill color. So if it's greater than 1, make it red. So I'm going to say okay. So for example, if this was 2, it turns red, which is nice. I'm going to undo that. So if it turns red, that's not good. I'm going to select this again. We're going to go to the conditional formatting. I'm going to choose the condition. I'm going to say less than this time, and say if it's less than -1, I also want you to make it turn red. So if it goes less than -1, make it turn red. So -2 turns red. Undo. And then if it's between -1 and 1, I'd like it to be green. So we're going to go, okay, styles, conditional formatting, and that one we're going to go between item. And we're going to say, okay, if it's between -1 and 1, then I don't want it to be red like it is now. I'd like it to be green because that's good. Green's for go. That means we're okay. So I'm going to say green and okay. So there we have it. So now if it's like, once again, if it's -2, good. If it's just 1, then we're okay. But if it's 2, then it turns red. So now if anything is thrown off here in our formula, we'll be able to see it visually quite quickly. So let's just go ahead and spell check it one more time. So there we have it. So next time we'll start to create our general ledger, which is a tedious kind of task. If I go back on over here, the general ledger, you can see lines up this whole thing is going to give us a breakout of this information. And we'll put that together, and we want to do it in such a way so I can add up the general ledger here, and it should add up to 0 as well, giving us that check figure. Note that we're doing this in such a way that we're going to enter data into both this data input and into the general ledger to double check them instead of combining them together and doing like the GL that pulls into the trial balance, because we want to do the double data input to see the impact when we do our practice worksheet. So later on, we might do a little bit of a twist, a little bit different item, making the trial balance be created directly from the general ledger. We'll talk about that more in future presentations.